Hello and welcome to Talking Tullahoma, a weekly podcast recapping the week's news, talking to the news makers, and looking ahead to upcoming events. I'm Kelly Lepchinsky, and today I'll be talking to civic stalwart Dot Watson about Tullahoma history, specifically history related to the Couch family, from the coming of the railroad to the delicatessen that still carries the name of her grandfather. After the interview, stay tuned to hear about events that are on tap in the weeks ahead. But first, here's a look back at the week ending Friday, August 22nd. Now, first up, while last week's episode was in production last Thursday, the new Live Smart Studios by Hilton celebrated its grand opening in Tullahoma. And it wasn't just a launch for a new location, it was a launch for the entire brand. Tullahoma welcomed the world's first Live Smart Studios last week. Now, the brand was envisioned to meet the demand for high-quality accommodations during longer stays. The 89-room hotel will be joined very soon by a second location in Kokomo, Indiana, which is another Air Force market where long-stay travel is frequent and stable. Kokomo is just 12 miles from Grissom Air Force Base. Now, on Friday, the nearest green lawsuit came to a close when a federal judge ordered a receivership for the Shelbyville distillery after the company defaulted on more than $100 million in loans. The next step is for the court to select the receiver. Both parties in the suit were ordered to submit a proposal for that selection by midweek. Also on Friday, Nashville television journalist Sylvia Castaneda stopped by downtown Tullahoma to find out more about the oldest shoe store in Tennessee and the 100-year-old cash register that is still being used at Clayton's shoe store. Fifth-generation owner Florence Hull told Local On 2 about the store's 125-year history, and then she introduced them to Annie Osborne, who began working for Clayton's more than 70 years ago. The segment is expected to air on WKRN in September. Now, later in the podcast, we will talk about another multi-generational business in Tullahoma. But the big news this week was about businesses that were changing hands. On Monday, the Tullahoma News reported that Sam Krim would no longer be at the helm of Sam's Custom Framing, and that the business had been acquired by the same couple who nearly 5 years ago acquired K&S Awards. Jeannie and Alan Rogers kept the name for the trophy shop, despite the fact it was chosen by the previous owners, Ken and Shauna Campbell. And it looks like they'll be keeping Sam's name, too. With the new business, they'll add the ability to frame sports memorabilia, including jerseys. Now, another business to change hands this week has a more varied history. 122 West. The restaurant on West Lincoln Street opened in 1997 as a fine dining establishment called Alexander's. It became the casual sports bar Fast Jack's sometime after that, until Jack Smith's ex-wife took ownership and nixed the sports. When chef Argy Miller bought the restaurant in 2018, well, he said he wouldn't change that familiar name, but it wasn't long until the restaurant at 122 West Lincoln Street became known simply as 122 West. Miller eventually sold the restaurant to a staff member, Kavala Schwal, and her business partner, Nicholas Conley. Now, the latest in the line of owners are a trio with varied backgrounds, from fast casual Chinese food at Panda Express to an unnamed restaurant in Italy, which could have something to do with the freshly baked Italian bread that will soon be served as the group expands the menu, and offers up meat and 3 lunch specials. Another change they've made is that the restaurant is open daily starting at 11 a.m., and a Sunday brunch menu is coming. But what they have not yet expanded are the hours. The restaurant still closes at 8 p.m. on weeknights and at 9 on the weekend. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, a 14-year-old business is keeping its local owner but ditching its location. Old Shed Brewing Company founder Mike Thornburg says his company is moving from its longtime home on East Carroll Street to a building on Montclair Street in the Tullahoma Industrial Park. The new digs will have 3,600 square feet of dedicated event space that will include golf simulators, televisions, and a sound system for live bands. The brewery equipment has already made the move. A new family-friendly tap room is expected to open by the end of the month. And then we've got businesses that are new all the way around. Tully's Coffee Company began construction in April, and they are now working on the interior space at 127 West Lincoln Street. The coffee shop is named after the owner's too short-lived Dalmatian, who in turn was named after their hometown, Tullahoma. So take note, it is not a branch of the Seattle-based coffee brand owned by Keurig. The owners hope to have their shop open before the end of the year. And professional baseball players Jordan and Justice Sheffield have partnered with their younger brother Jackson to open JS3 Athletics. It's a baseball and softball training facility focused on developing young athletes. The facility opened earlier this month on Wall Street in the alley behind the Atlantic event venue. The Sheffields are now accepting walk-in batting cage rentals, and other services include team bookings, private lessons, and camps. You can find out more at js3athletics.com. Now, in keeping with the local business theme, today I'll be talking to Dot Watson, a member of the prominent Couch family in Tullahoma. Like James Clayton's shoe store, a Couch family business has been in near continuous operation on the same block of downtown Tullahoma since the late 1800s. And it's no coincidence those two stores are on the same block, because at the time they opened, that block was just across the street from the train station. The train tracks for the Nashville and Chattanooga line were laid in 1852, and Tullahoma was chosen as the midpoint stop on that line, establishing what would become a railroad town. The city was chartered in October of that same year, and downtown business was not far behind.
Well, my grandfather, who was known as Daddy Billy, his real name was William Joseph Couch. He and his wife, Ella, who before marriage was Ella Laughlin, came from Shelbyville, or Bedford County, and they came because of the railroads. They came in 1883, and my grandfather came because he knew the railroads were starting up, and that was the old NC and St. L Railroad. And when they had passenger service, the trains didn't have food service cars on there at the time. So he came and started a grocery store on Atlantic Street, right across from where the railroads and where the train station was going to be. And it was where City Park is now. It was not where the location is now. And so the people, and because the trains, that train was a major, Tullahoma was a major stop because of the mail that was taken on and taken off. And so the train was here for a little while when it stopped here. So people would get off the train and come to his grocery store right across the railroad tracks to get a snack. It was usually, they would get a slab of cheese cut from a big round of cheese and crackers, and that would be their meal. I don't know what they got to drink. Probably buttermilk in those days.
Something they drank there, not back on the train, I'm sure.
Probably. Yeah. And so, but they would have time to do that, to make that trek over there. And Daddy Billy loved meeting people from any place and everywhere, and he made many friends. He was a very special gentleman, and I couldn't have had a better grandfather. I just absolutely adored him for many, many reasons.
So now Daddy Billy, of course, now what we know as Daddy Billy's Delicatessen is that site that was the grocery store.
That's exactly right.
But if you look at the building, if you've never gone down Atlantic Street and taken a close look, there were always two sides of that building, and there's two doors, one middle spot. Now there's a wall between the two.
Yeah.
But I think Couch's was on one side and Daddy Billy's was on the other side. But at the time of the grocery store, that was just one connected building.
That's right. It was later that, well, my grandfather and grandmother had two children. My dad, who was Robert Laughlin Couch, named for his mother's maiden name, and one of the ancestors on the Couch side. And then they had a daughter, Nell Elizabeth, and they were very close. But Nell married a gentleman from Warren County, and he was a professor at a college in Commerce, Texas. At that time, it was East Texas State College, and he taught agriculture there. And now it's a part of the A&M system in Texas. But they married at the home place on Atlantic Street at 3 o'clock in the morning because the train was leaving at 4. And so they got on the train at 4 o'clock right after having been married at 3 and took off for Texas. And they never lived here, but we did visit them from time to time. My dad and mother had 3 children. Mm-hmm. And their first child was Mary Cersei Couch. And she married G.C. King, and they had the King Hotel. And they lived in the hotel when they were first married. And then my mother and dad's second child was their son, Robert Laughlin Couch Jr., and he's the one who inherited most of the store and ran that. And then I came along 15 years after Bob. My sister was 17 when I was born, and so I guess I was an afterthought. But anyway, I adored both of them. They were very good to me. They were good older siblings, and we've always enjoyed each other's company.
Now, we were talking before we started taping about, I believe, if I got this correct, Bob's senior, Robert Couch,
Yeah.
and why there was a radio station. What happened? So get us from the grocery store to the electronics store.
Okay. My dad went to school here in Tullahoma, of course, and graduated from the old Fitzgerald Clark School. And so after he graduated, he and several others from here went to Georgia Tech to study engineering. One of them was the patriarch of the Sanders family. And so they went down to Georgia Tech, and it wasn't, I think it was 2 years after they started there that World War I started. And so the two of them had the patriotic feeling of joining the military, so they both joined the Marine Corps. And they went to Parris Island, South Carolina, for their training there. And my dad had always been interested in cameras and that kind of thing, so he took lots of pictures at Parris Island and during his term of service there. And then he was sent to Norfolk, and he was stationed on the USS Nevada, and it was right before it was getting ready to be shipped out to go to Germany that he came down with the Spanish flu, which was so prevalent at that time. And I believe it was 1916, 17, and the family was called and told if they wanted to see their son alive again, they should come very quickly to Norfolk. And he was in the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. And my grandfather Daddy Billy didn't feel like he could really leave the store. So my grandmother and our family doctor, Dr. Dossett, who also served at one time as our mayor, went to Norfolk. And of course, in those days, you didn't go fast. I don't know how they got there. But my dad was still alive, and he did survive, or I wouldn't be here telling you this story. But my dad, after he was discharged from the Marine Corps after World War I was over, he was coming back to Tullahoma to go into business with his dad, Daddy Billy, at the grocery store. But that was not his cup of tea. He wanted to do something with his engineering. So he got the store next door, which became Couch's, and that's where he sold electrical appliances. And he had the Frigidaire line, but he also loved cameras and photography, so he had a department of that in the store as well. And he also had a department where they sold records at the time. Of course, they were the big old records. Mm-hmm. And he had converted a radio some years later into a phonograph for me, but he could fix most anything. And there was never a Christmas or a holiday, Thanksgiving, Easter meal, that he didn't get a call that somebody's whatever wasn't working, oven, refrigerator, what have you. And he never called on his help to go out during holidays. He always went himself, and I accompanied him more often than not and got to meet a lot of people in town.
Now, there's one particular appliance, I believe, that he sold, and in order to sell the radio.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
Well, when radios came out, of course, being an engineer, he was excited to be able to have some radios to sell. But there was no station around where people could listen to anything. So he said, well, I'll fix that. I'll just open my own radio station. And it was in our home place. And even years later, I could see the wires hanging down from the ceiling in the attic where he had the radio station. And he would have local people who were talented and to come and sing or play the piano and what have you. And it was, of course, by the time I came along, they didn't have it there. But he had his own call numbers. He had an old Hallicrafter set and would talk to people all over. It was really fascinating.
I think we looked that up before we started talking. WCBV, if I'm correct.
I think so.
Were the call letters there for that one?
And he enjoyed that. It was his hobby and what he loved to do. And people in town loved it, and they started buying radios once they had something they could listen to.
So I guess that's about the time that the wall was closed up between the two stores, I'm guessing, when
No, it was later.
it was later. Okay, so he had appliances and electronics on one side of the same building. Okay.
Absolutely. And then there was the mutual stairway in between the two. Very long, very steep. And there were businesses upstairs in offices. There were several lawyers who had their offices upstairs. There was an insurance agency. And my dad loved to develop pictures, so he had his dark room up there. And I would often go with him up there and see what he was doing and watch him and help. And then it's also interesting that the Coffee County Health Department in Tullahoma was housed up there at one time. Of course, in this day and time, that wouldn't go because of the Disabilities Act. People couldn't get up there. But the minute you opened the big door downstairs to go up those steps, you could smell that antiseptic smell of medicine.
Okay.
And septic.
Not too far a cry for later when you might smell developer or fixer for the photography stuff.
Yes.
So
Yeah. One thing that both of my parents did, and they learned it, I think, from Daddy Billy. I never knew my grandmother Couch, Miss Ella, because she died in 1925, and I wasn't born until 1939. And I'm sorry I didn't know her because I heard wonderful stories about her. My grandparents were some of the first members of the Christian church here in town. And that church at first met in a home down on Atlantic Street, close to where the Baptist church now has an educational building on the corner of Grundy and Atlantic. It was in a person's home, but they decided the trains were too loud that went through, so they should move. So they moved one block away where they can still hear the trains. But it's the little white church, brick church, on the corner of Atlantic, of Jackson and Grundy, and has been there. And we're getting ready to celebrate our 150th anniversary next year.
Wow.
So it's been there a long time.
That is.
And I have recipes, a recipe book from that era when the ladies put that out. And it's always fascinating to read and see the names.
So now I wanted to back up to you're one of three children.
Yes.
Okay. So your brother, Bob Couch, became Couch's, the camera store that we all knew for such a long
Right.
time. And then the Delicatessen was on the other side. And that has undergone some ownership changes. Now, Couch's Photography, I'm sure that there are lots of people that know the American Pickers. You know, Mike Wolf, I think, that was down here and went to pick through the couches. And now that side of the building has been closed for a little while. And the last I'd heard of it was that it was in the hands of Cameron Newton, who's an investor around town.
Right.
And I believe he's also got his hand in the Daddy Billy side as well. Do we know of any future plans to reintegrate the building, or are there secrets there we cannot tell?
I know no secrets, and I don't know because I'm not a. I don't have financial interest in
Right,
it, and so
right.
I don't ask questions.
I
It's
gotcha.
whatever they.
Well, Cameron Newton, I believe, was also a hand in opening next door on the other side, the Spinelli's Pizzeria. I think he had a hand in bringing that franchise here. There wasn't one in the South at all. So I was looking forward to seeing what he would do at the other side of the building, but I guess that's just going to be a wait and see. You mentioned that the train depot
Yes.
was basically across the street where History Park is now. Some people call
Yes.
it the Caboose Park, where that red caboose is, but it is History Park.
Yes.
So when we still have a train depot, though, when did they move the original train
Yes.
depot?
When they decided to move it, they put that train station up on on. I'm not sure what it was. I don't remember, but they used a mule and had a rope tied to the mule and to the train station, and they would go a little distance and go around, and it was really fascinating. And my dad took movies of that when that happened, and they moved it, and it was just one building, and then they added on several other, like a passenger waiting room and a freight part of the depot, and I very often would have to run over because my mother wrote to her mother in Texas every day, and I would often have to run over and give the letter to the man on the mail car, and it was interesting. And of course, the train played such a big part during our Camp Forest days because the people who were stationed there came in and out on the train all the time when as the men were getting ready to be shipped out, they wanted their wives, their mothers, their girlfriends to be able to come and say goodbye to them. And what was so interesting is we didn't have the commercial space. We had the King Hotel, but it wasn't very large, and the more room was needed. So people, being so patriotic during World War II, opened up their homes to house those women who came. They weren't here long. I loved it when we had them at our house because for me it was like having extra big sisters or aunts who had time on their hands to play with me. I was 4 and 5 at the time, and it was wonderful.
You know, this strikes a bell in my head. There's part of me thinking of you being 4 or 5 in Camp Forest. Am I correct in thinking that you have a doll of yours in the Camp Forest Museum, which used to be housed at the Fine Arts Center?
Yes, I do. Because one of the women who stayed at our house was a nurse. And she and I would play dolls. And my poor doll had chicken pox and whooping cough and measles and a few broken bones. And she taught me how to take care of her. For the broken bones, we get sticks and wrap around the broken bone. She even made a little white pinafore for me and decorated it with embroidered a red cross on it. And I thought I was a real nurse. But what she didn't realize was that she implanted seeds in my heart to want to be a nurse.
I was going to say, because that's exactly what you went on to do, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So as many changes as you have seen in Tullahoma over the years that we've talked about, are there any changes that you look forward to that you would like to see for Tullahoma, or is there anything looking back that just stands out as your favorite major change?
We used to have parades all the time. We used to have a Halloween parade, and the children would wear their costumes, and they would go from school. School would let out early, and they would have a parade. We had parades, Veterans Day parade, 4th of July parade. You know, of course, we still have the Christmas parade. You know, and we had many patriotic kinds of events, especially with the influence of Camp Forest.
Yeah.
And I think we were a much more patriotic society in those days. But back to Daddy Billy, and when he first came here, they lived first in a house that was on the corner by South Jackson, on the side that South Jackson's on. And they were there not too long, and then they moved into the old Victorian at 308 North Atlantic Street.
And those are historic, even prior to the couch occupation, right?
Yes, they were built by a man who was a banker for his two daughters who married brothers, and they each received one of those homes, and then they later sold them. So the Crouches and the Couches lived next door to each other in those two homes.
At the end there, Dot mentioned the Crouch family. That family has a long history of civic involvement dating back to Hubert Adair Crouch, who was the president and manager of the Tullahoma Ice and Coal Company starting in 1912. Now, Dot and I talked for a good long time this week, and we may hear more from that interview in a future episode. But I've got another generation of the Couch family lined up to join us next month. Bob Couch's daughters, Candy Couch and Fran Gray, will join me in the studio in September. Now, Dot wasn't the only person to join me in the studio this week. Reviewer Susan Campbell stopped by to tell us about her latest read from the author of Daisy Jones and the Six and the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. In her new book, Atmosphere, author Taylor Jenkins Reid delves into the space shuttle program in the early 1980s.
The main character's name is Joan Goodwin, and she is an astronomer, and her goal has always been to go to space. So she applies for the space program when it first opens up to women, when they start, organizing the shuttle in the early 80s. And she gets in, and then she becomes very close with her other men and women who are in the same class that she is. And it opens in December of '84 when there has been a disaster in the air when two of the astronauts go out to do their spacewalk, and something whips loose and breaks the goes into the spacesuit, and of course that's going to kill the person who is in that. And just about everybody is either dead or dying except for the one person. Her name is Vanessa, and she is a pilot. So she has to pilot this plane with the crack in it. They couldn't get the doors closed. I'm not very technical on all of this.
Right.
But she has to fly back through the atmosphere and hope it doesn't burn up. So in the middle, so that's the opening scene, and then in the middle is the background of all of what happened in the early days of the shuttle program, and some of it gets a little technical. And I'm sure she had a lot of help researching a lot of this with astronauts. And I sort of, glazed over in the parts with all the technical, because I don't really care that much about the technical end of it. I'm more interested in the story and the characters. And then in the end, it has her, she's on the ground crew, and she's trying to direct Vanessa, who is the pilot on the shuttle, how to get home with her dead and dying compatriots in the shuttle with her. But it's really good because, if when we've listened to the ground control talking to the astronauts, how technical they are, but then it goes into the background about what they're actually thinking the whole time they're talking about what's going on. So it's really a good read. Some of it gets a little caught up in the technicalities of it, but the last 15 or 20 pages you just can't put it down. So
now, Taylor Jenkins Reid has a really good way of giving you that perspective. I didn't read Daisy Jones and the Six when everybody else did. I just listened to it on a car trip because I wasn't going to be in the car for a long time and needed something. But I was really impressed by the way she, in that book, handled a band and what each individual person was thinking, and yet the same situation, how it's interpreted by one person and interpreted by another person.
Exactly.
Can be very, very different. And I think that's a really big skill that she's got as a writer.
I agree. And even in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, she did the same thing. And she always the 3 books I've read, she puts a twist at the end that you're not expecting.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So,
Okay. So there's another twist in this one as well, sort of?
yes, there is.
Okay.
And the last several pages are just, you can't put it down because you wonder, is she going to make it back? Is she not going to make it back? And, and they sort of prepare her for the fact that she won't make it back. And I won't tell you how it ends. She may not. But
Okay.
we'll just let people read it and
Gotta
find
read
out.
it.
But I would recommend it. It's it's not a hard book to read, and I learned a lot more about the space shuttle program.
Now, moving from liftoffs to touchdowns, the Tullahoma High School Wildcats are ready to launch their new football season on Saturday at home against Shelbyville. The game starts at 7, and you can watch it live on LightTube Television Channel 23 or listen to the game on 93.9 The Duck. And now, here's a look at what's happening. The Highland Rim Bicycle Club's annual ERV 100 is set for Labor Day weekend. Kickstands go up at 7:30 Saturday the 30th after registration at 6 a.m. at West Middle School. There are several routes to choose from, but the $80 fee remains the same no matter how far you ride. Proceeds benefit Pedal for Alzheimer's. Find out more online at pedalforalzheimers.org/2025 Elk River Valley 100. Saturday the 30th will also see runners hit the streets at 7:30 as the annual Fit Beyond 5K Color Run takes off from the Food Lion Shopping Center. This race tends to avoid high traffic routes, but you'll want to keep your eyes open on the connecting streets from West Lincoln to Farah Elementary and South Jackson. And if you'd like to be among the racers, it's not too late. You can still register for $35 online at runsignup.com. The second annual Blocks Bass Tournament is set for Saturday, September 6th on Timms Ford. The entry fee per boat is $100, and up to 3 people can fish from the same boat. Registration will take place on the day of the event at the Timms Ford Bass Club in Winchester. Fishing starts at 7 a.m. For more information, contact Dawn Milloway at 581-6421. Rehearsals for the annual Tullahoma Civic Choir will begin on Monday, September 8th. The choir is open to all singers, and rehearsals will be held at 7 p.m. each Monday until the concert is held on December 13th. A $25 fee helps to cover the cost of the music. To find out more, contact Michael Brown at 247-5013. Join the Tullahoma Fire Department this year as they climb the stairs at Wilkins Stadium in honor of the first responders who lost their lives in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The event will begin with a sign-in at 8:30 on the morning of September 11th. Register on the city's Facebook page, City of Tullahoma, TN. And that's what's happening. Thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Talking Tullahoma. If you've got a story or an event that you'd like to share on the podcast, call and leave me a message at 571-7186 or email news@lighttube.net. I'll be back soon with more of what makes Tullahoma tick. Until then, you can listen to Talking Tullahoma on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. New episodes drop on Thursdays. Please rate and review. For the video version, follow us on YouTube. Just search for TUA LightTube. I'm Kelly Lepchinsky. Catch you next week.